Hey, 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 Crown Nation. It's your girl, Nefertari. Today we're going to be talking this is our episode 6 episode 8 of season 6, and we're going to be talking about modesty and fashion. So we want to welcome you. We welcome our Crown Nation. I'm your queen, Nefertari, and with me is our queen, Naima.
Hey, 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 Crown Nation.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about one of our with both of us, one of our favorite things is fashion, of course. But we're going to be kind of talking about from a little bit different perspective. Not just fashion as in the statement itself or how you look or how you feel when you wear what you wear, but just thinking about that question: what is modesty? What is modesty, and who is it really for? And so first, we're just going to kind of get off into defining what modesty is, and modesty is not just about your dress. This is something that's an outward thing and an inward thing. So it's part of the definition too, is just being not too proud of yourself or being too confident about yourself, although we should be, but not just being overly done, in your abilities of dress, not overdoing it, even though there are certain times and certain places and things that we do where we might kind of step it up, but in your speech and your behavior and your manner, your appearance. So of course, modesty it gives us the opportunity to avoid indecency, and so today we're going to kind of talk about modesty. Muslims, we're very familiar with this word, and a lot of times when people see Muslims, and they can identify the Muslim women on the street, right? Just based on how they look, and some of us have, we have different looks, different diverse looks from different parts of the world on what a Muslim looks like. But as a whole, people are able to look at us and identify like, oh, that's a Muslim. And so, but today we want to kind of talk about just everybody. You have Christians, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, everybody, and there is a proper way that everyone is supposed to handle themselves modestly in their dress and their speech and all of that. So we're going to kind of go over some articles. Somebody did a research, and we'll kind of hear about some background from different women from the different faiths on what their perspective is and how they see. So we as Muslims, of course, we're very familiar with that, right, Naima? With I think you're muted.
Yeah, I am muted. My microphone is muted, and I'm hoping that I'm not lagging because there's a lot of stuff happening right now.
Okay, with the internet.
Yes, with the internet. So thank you so much to Comcast and AT&T.
Right.
You both are not doing your job.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, modest fashion. This is something that, again, as you talked about, is near and dear to both of our hearts. But really, it's not just. I think it's just fashion, period, and it just so happens to be that it's modest, right? And so when we start talking about like modest fashion and who is it for and what is it, it's really of course, as Muslims, it's kind of like our everyday lifestyle, what we're supposed to look like going out. And of course, the big question is, as you were stating earlier, when we're walking in the street, people can say, oh, that's a Muslim woman. But then there are some Muslim women that people can't identify. And then then people want to ask the question, what is that about, right? So we kind of want to also talk a little bit about that, like, why do some Muslim women cover and some don't? But again, we talked about how modesty gives us protection. Modesty stimulates the intellect, and that when you understand our spirit, our nature, our way of life, that the power of Allah, it makes us being modest so much more easier, right? And just thinking about haya, right? How this term in our life kind of like resonates. So I think that sometimes what people think of when it comes to modesty, especially as Muslims, is like, oh, your head is covered, right? But it's not just about covering your head. It's also about modesty in your speech, modesty in your how you look, how you talk, how you treat other people. And when you're doing those things, how does that come across? Because I've seen some people, like, they're dressed really, really modest, but what's coming out of their mouth is immodest. So when we're talking about fashion, it's kind of like it starts on the outside because that's what people see. but
Mhm.
really it emulates from the inside. And so there's so
Exactly.
much to be said about like it's starting from the inward and going outward. And of course, the modest dress can be very fashionable. And of course,
Mm.
we know that the modest dress is like a multi-billion-dollar industry. Multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's so funny because like, you know what, you and I, we've gone to like the mall, and I'm like, didn't didn't you make that outfit in
Right,
2014 at the
right.
Sale Nectar Fashion
We
Show?
do.
How is
Uh-huh.
this now hanging up in the store and Liz Claiborne or whoever else has this outfit? And I'm like, no, they're stealing all of our designs, honey. Let me just say that. They're stealing all of our.
But but let me tell you, I know we're on the Muslims right now, but let me tell you, like so many like things have shifted so much since I, first had an interest in fashion. And
Mm-hmm.
when I had the interest, my interest was solely because there wasn't that much out there for us as Muslim women.
Yeah.
And so going to the stores or trying to put pieces together and styling and layering and all of that. So that was like my interest and why I got involved in it. But even when you look today, like there's so many, the big time designers, the
Yeah.
household name brands, even down to the makeup or most people in their, their businesses and their advertisement, you're going to see there's, a diverse group of individuals. And most of the time you're going to see that person on there that's indicated as a Muslim.
Right. Right.
Um, but then you also have
Now.
different right now. Uh-huh. And
Mm-hmm.
so people are it's to be expected. You see more of us in the workplace, you see more of us, in certain positions in stores when you walk in, whereas you didn't used to see that. So now it is a big difference with that. And so, but I think that when it comes to modesty, a lot of times people feel like I feel that like it's just for the Muslims, and the Muslim women have to dress this way, the Muslim women have to dress that way. But actually, with the various religions,
Yeah.
there are different forms of modesty. Like people
Yeah.
define modesty differently.
Yeah.
So as a Christian woman, like there's a form of modesty for them where they might look at another Christian woman, like one woman might look at another woman and say, oh, maybe, you don't want to see the valley between the hills, the mountains kind of thing. The cleavage
Yes.
not too
Oh
much
my God.
or bringing
Right.
your skirts a little bit too high, bring it down to the knee, that kind of thing, or bring your neckline up here. And so for them, that's a form of modesty. For
Yeah.
us, taking that skirt to the knee is not modest enough for us. So it just
Right.
kind of depends on what it is. And even when you talked about covering the hair, just real quick, and even for different religions, like sometimes just on Sundays, when they go to service, just putting on a hat. For them, that's covering the hair, and that's a form of modesty. That's a form of respect for their belief system. So
Yeah, and if as we examine kind of like Christian women, I know that Megan Good had a big issue with the women at the church,
mm,
really judging her and passing judgment on her, and which really became like a big issue in her marriage with her husband. And
mhm,
although they decided to part ways, but she spoke about in different interviews how her, like, I think she had on this one particular blue dress, and she was like on the red carpet. And
mhm,
again, it was low cut in the front and then it had a high split. And I believe one of the comments was something like, as the pastor or, as the leader of the church, he should, teach his wife how to dress better. And so, again, even amongst the Christian women, they have specific views. I know that when I was in church, I know y'all like, what? I was in, yeah, I was in church. When I was in church in high school, and in middle school and in high school, like it was a no-no to wear your skirt above the knee,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And so my brother always likes to tell, my mom really loves to tell the story about how I went to school one day. It was picture day, and I had my skirt, and it was below the knee when I left the house, but when I went to school, honey, I got that needle and thread, and I pulled this
Okay.
skirt, I rolled it up, right, and then I hand stitched this the
Mhm.
hem in, right, and totally forgot that I did that, right,
You got
and
home.
so, girl, when I got home, my mother was like, "What is going on?" And I was like,
Mhm,
"Oops," right, so
mhm.
for us, it was like, yeah, even like sometimes wearing spaghetti straps as a Christian woman in some some Christian
Have
denominations.
shoulders out.
Yeah,
Mhm.
having the shoulders out is kind of like a no-no. As long as you have like the thick straps, it's okay. But the spaghetti straps, it was like no, no. And anything that was showing all of this skin up here is like, no, girl, that is a no-no. So oftentimes, if we did wear a dress that was kind of like strapless, we always had to have a little bolero jacket with it. Just to
Mhm.
show a little bit of modesty, even as Christian women. So Amish women. Amish women have a whole nother style as well. You know, they look Amish women, they take it up a notch sometimes when you think about Muslim women, right? Amish women
Yeah,
are
that's what I
like
was gonna
they will
say.
only
Mhm.
wear one style
Mhm.
and long sleeves, long and all of their dresses have pants underneath it, right? And then of course they're always wearing their head covering. But yeah, they have a totally different they have different guidelines as well.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah,
You
so
know, there's an area that I drive in sometime, I'm trying to remember where it is, and I feel like they're Amish, I'm not sure, but they wear black a lot. So I don't know if the Amish like, and it's so funny because this is what people say about Muslims because I'm not so
right?
sure.
Forgive us of our ignorance if we're
It's
saying
funny.
something crazy right now.
But I always see them, and I know that it's their when you talk about establishing community life, you can tell that it's their neighborhood,
Mhm.
it's their homes, they're walking to church. I believe that's what they call it, but they're walking to their place of worship.
Mhm.
And but I noticed that a lot of them they're very modest with their
Oh,
they,
is that by where the swim thing is?
you know what, when I go that way, yes.
Okay,
What is it,
those are
on the
Orthodox
drive area?
Jews.
Say
Orthodox Jews.
Orthodox Jews. Oh, okay, okay,
Those
okay.
are
See, I
Orthodox
told you I
Jews.
didn't know who, but when I always take notice of them, and I'm like, wow, they're walking with their families, and the
Yeah.
men are dressed up, and the women have on their clothes, and they're covered, and they have like the little the women have on the little
Them-
caps, like kind of reminds me of
Oh,
a nursing kind of a
yeah.
nursing cap kind of
I know what
thing,
you're
and
talking
so
about.
it's a
Yeah.
form of
I don't know what
covering.
you're talking about. Mhm.
Yes, and so let's talk about what the Quran says about modesty.
Okay.
Um, so the Quran makes a few references, but just general principles of the modesty with dress. Allah says in Quran, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim," He said, "And say to the believing men and women that they should lower their gaze, guard their modesty, and they should not display their beauty and ornaments except that must ordinarily appear." So, and that they should draw their veil over their bosom. And this is Surah 24, ayat 31. So it says, Allah says this will make you greater in purity. And so when we talk about modesty coming from the inside out, when you carry yourself a certain way, um, it's like it starts in here first.
Yeah.
It's in the heart, and then your mindset, and then really like how you are inside, you're going to see that exude on the outside. And
Yeah.
so even with your form of understanding, I know when I was growing up, and I've been Muslim all my life, I went to public school, and not in my beginning years. My beginning years, I was at Sister Claire Muhammad. I would kind of go back and forth in Kansas City, Missouri.
Mhm.
But for my most years, I was in public school, and so there were no other Muslims around. The pressure was on. We would wear a scarf sometimes, sometimes not. But it was also an understanding that modesty um, is like we still dress modest, even if our hair was uncovered. And so, I would just get my scarf when it was time for prayer. But then I grew into this thing where, as I got older, where, I'm reaching for my scarf out my glove box in my car or whatever, and I was like, if I gotta grab this scarf this many times a day, like I might as well just have it on. And so I had to grow into getting into that point. And I know that there's a lot of conversation, especially within our community, on just how we wear what we wear. I saw some Muslims in the store the other day, and a lot of times if we don't look like them, it's like, or you give them the greetings, you might not get the greetings back. So
Oh.
for example, for me, this is modest. And Imam Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, he may Allah forgive him his sins and have mercy on his soul. He really talked about us and our people and us having our own identity. Like we
Right.
don't necessarily try to look. So I think that a lot of times that's why people, when they look at us and they're like, where are you from? Not
Right.
necessarily from Africa. Where you no, you can't be American.
Right. Right.
You black, you like, and it's like we got our own style and our flavors. So when it's like for a certain to a certain extent, we're still trying to we know what we look like, but we're still trying to identify ourselves to others, you know. Other people especially are trying to figure out who we are.
Right, right,
Who
right.
are you? Where do you come from?
Right. And I like that we have our own style. And again, when you start talking about this is really, digging start when you have to start digging into the exact language of the Quran. This is
Mhm,
when you have the difference between a kimar and a hijab and drawing over the bosom and then the age limit and the requirements and things like that. And
mhm,
really, it's very, very important for anyone of any religion to understand your practice, meaning what is required, right? The requirement of the religion and or practice, and then how you are evolving within that. So you may not be at the level where it is the requirement, right? But you really should be practicing to get to the requirement. And I think that
mhm,
sometimes we hear women often say, "Oh, Allah knows my heart." He
mhm,
does. And one thing that he says about the heart is that it shows on the outside. And so
mhm,
not to put to anyone to shame, but again, if you feel no shame, then do as you please, right? So it's kind of like when you start seeing things that show up a specific way, it's that way because of how the person is feeling. They don't feel shameful, so yeah, it's okay for them to, um, you know, maybe wear shorts as a Muslim woman, or maybe wear a tank top as a Muslim woman, But hopefully as they're evolving, they're learning, they know what the requirement is and that they're evolving toward that requirement, not just as Muslim women, but also Christian and other women of faith that practice the elements of modesty as well.
And the other thing I want to mention too, Naeem, is that, in Islam, I know a lot of times we hear the talk where the focus is on the women, but in Islam, the men and women, we both share responsibility where we have
Right.
to uphold modesty, in our actions, in our attire. There was an article I was reading not long ago, and it was just kind of talking about how things have shifted so much these days, and not just for the women, but for the men, for
Oh
the
my
young boys and the young girls. It's like, because whether they are wearing outfits where, they look like a bra, or, wearing pants where, the panties are all out, the guys got their underwear out or the pants are so tight. So they were just talking about the
God.
difference now than where it used to be. So when someone dresses or behaves modestly, it helps to, for one, in the chastity,
Yeah.
their chastity for one. And, it just encourages, modesty encourages honoring the woman.
Right.
And so the same thing for the man, like if they're doing what they need to do, and then together you can like just see each other in a different light where you're not, gravitating toward that. And so it just, if you dress modestly, then, in all aspects of life, this could just really help you all the way around,
Yeah.
kind of keep you out of some trouble too.
Right, right. And just also thinking about like I think that what we sometimes also look and think of modesty as each other,
Hmm.
which is one of the signs of haya and one of the practices of haya. But the biggest is, of course, your relationship with Allah. And
Hmm.
so thinking about how he is seeing you at all times, right? Because he sees you at all times, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And how is your relationship with him? And how does your modesty show up with him? Because when you love someone and you love something, you always show up your best, right? And so just
Hmm.
thinking about like if you were going on a date with your spouse or you're going out with your girlfriends, what do? You get dressed to the nine, right? You're looking nice and good. And just remembering that, man, maintain that all the time. Because
Hmm.
again, Allah sees everything. He sees you. And so just remembering that the first level, of course, is haya with Allah, and then of course haya with those around you. And you still have to even have haya with yourself, like
Hmm.
understanding that you yourself should have your own level of modesty with yourself, right? And I'm sure that some people are like, what does that mean? But there are levels of modesty that you should have with your own self. You shouldn't be accepting yourself in a devalued kind of way. And one thing that makes me think about that is when we, back in the day in the 1800s, 1900s, everybody used to dress up so not like wake
Yeah.
up, everybody would get dressed. They didn't,
Even
it
if
didn't
you're
matter if
going
they
to
had
the
a
grocery store.
job, if they were going to go into the fields, it didn't
Mhm.
matter if they were going to be sitting at home, everybody dressed up. And just the level of dignity that the human being had on all
Mhm.
levels. And remembering that everybody dressed up. So the level of modesty was really just across the board solid. And I
Mhm.
believe that in, if I'm not mistaken, in the 1910s and 1920s, they began to kind of reduce the A-line dresses and make them more straight, right? Make them more pencil-like. And they also began to lower and cut the neckline. And so that's when you saw kind of like, yeah, you saw the flappers, but then you saw the flappers dresses start going down. All of this started going down, right? And so
Mhm.
the dresses where the women would dress up and they had long sleeves and everything, the dresses started coming off of the dress line as well. And this started to be more, they started to show more. And that's also why women would wear shawls because, yeah, you cold girl, because you got all this out, right? And something else that we talked about, I've talked about with other people, like when you're running and you're in sports, and we have our long sleeves on or our long pants or whatever. People are like, "Are you hot?" No, because the
Oh
sun's
my
not
gosh.
touching us. The
Mhm.
sun's not touching us. So if you have on short
For
sleeves,
me, I have to be covered or I'm hot.
right?
I'm
Exactly.
burning.
And
It's
guess
like
what?
I'm pulling the sleeve down, like
Right, and studies have we know the studies. We know that you're hot when the sun hits your skin directly, but studies have recently been brought forward saying that people who do wear shorts and short sleeves, their body temperature is higher than those that are covered. And it's also like, hey, the lawn maintenance people, girl, they gonna be masked all up, long sleeves on, hood, hat, right?
you
Like, are they hot? No, they are not hot.
know. Yeah, it was something I was gonna say. I can't remember what it was, but mm, yeah, I lost it as soon as you start talking about the lawn people. But it was about the covering. Oh my god, I'm like you were last week.
About the long, I know, right? About the long sleeves and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I can't remember, but it takes me back a little bit to like desert, just covering and it's just kind of like if you don't have it. I remember when I went on Hajj,
Mm,
I sweat so much. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. It does matter what kind of fabric choice that you wear.
oh,
You want to
say
make sure
that
you have
again.
something breathable,
Say
you
that
know.
again.
Yes, it does
Say it.
matter what type of fabric that you have. You want to cover in fabric that you can breathe in.
Right. And so no, you cannot wear that fabric that looks like plastic and
Oh,
expect not to be sweating.
oh my goodness. Oh, that
Okay.
kind of reminds me of that well, if I say old school, but they still have them out. Those sweatsuits that are literally sweatsuits, the plastic ones you put on to work out.
Literally, yes.
Where you sweat so much and you're supposed to lose weight in inches. Like
And
my mother
sweatsuits.
used to have one of those.
They're
Huh?
mixed blends, right? Aren't sweatsuits mixed blends?
Well, you're talking about basic sweatsuits that people wear, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about the actual sweatsuit that you work
I know
out in.
yeah, that you
Yes.
work out in. Yeah, I'm saying, but even sweatsuits, I
Yeah,
believe it.
they are
Yeah,
mixed.
yeah.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, like, yeah, you put a sweatsuit on, and it's 90 degrees out in the summertime. That sweatsuit, yeah, you're gonna be sweating.
Yeah, but even the breathable sports fabric, like the shirts that you like
Mhm.
to wear, those are great to put on when exercising,
Oh,
Even if it's
I
wearing
love
like you
dry
like to wear
fit.
yours on a regular basis, even up underneath stuff. Because then if you sweat, it absorbs it and kind of turns it a little bit into an air conditioner.
Yes, thank God for dry fit. Yes.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, but that's also still a part of modesty, like dry fit long sleeves, dry fit, all of these different things. But going back to the
Well,
verses
Naima,
in the Quran. Hmm?
oh, okay. Go ahead. I'll let you do that first, and we're gonna move on. I'm gonna ask you a question.
Oh, okay. So going back to the verses in the Quran when it says that in God's eyes, the most honored of you are the ones who are most mindful of him. God is all knowing, all aware. And that is chapter 49, verse 13. But again, this goes back to the awareness of knowing that Allah sees you all the time. Alhamdulillah.
Mm-hmm. So we kind of talked about what the Quran says, and this is home for us.
Yes.
And but now we want to talk about what the Bible says. Originally we wanted to have somebody on to be able to talk about that, but Naima, I believe you can handle this. Being that you've had some background being Christian for a while as a young girl, and then you coming into Islam. I want to just kind of hear from you what you remember like growing up, what it meant to be modest with your dress. I know you kind of shared with us about the mini skirt thing,
Right.
which reminded me, we talk about it not just being about clothes, but makeup and not being overly done and this kind of thing. And so I remember when I was in middle school, and I put some eyeliner on, and you're not supposed to be wearing no eyeliner, nothing.
At all.
I put some eyeliner on when I went to school and forgot I had it on. I'm like,
yes,
your eyes looking all hard, like you got plenty of time for that when you grow up. But yeah, that's funny. So Mama got you in that mini skirt. But tell us, what some of the experiences are and what people say and how it is in the church.
I mean, it was so interesting because I did grow up Muslim. So I was born Muslim. And then when we moved from Las Cruces, New Mexico to Texas, after a while being in Texas, we left Islam. So I was about 8 years old. And so really, even as a young girl, my mother kept me in like dresses, long sleeve dresses. And I don't know if you remember back in the day, we used to have a dress that came to our knee and then a pair of pants underneath it. Right. And so you couldn't wear a dress without pants back way back then. Right. And of course, always had my head covered. And when I was younger.
So you wore your hair covered even after you were 8 years old? After
after I was 8, I didn't. But one thing that changed was that when we became Christian, my mom still was like, yeah, you have to still dress modest. So it wasn't like all of a sudden I was wearing all these different clothes. Because again, even for my 8th grade dance, my mom, she made my dress and I had long sleeves. It was a mermaid dress. It was not form fitting. It was kind of mermaid, but kind of not. You know what I'm saying?
I think I had that dress too.
Okay.
Kind of not.
Oh my gosh. And girl, my mom had made she had got this ribbon and put on my neck and made a necklace with earrings. And girl, it was so itchy that day. But also one thing that as Christian women, we used to not be able to wear big earrings. And so as a young girl, number one, could not wear my hair down. It was considered loose to wear your hair down as a young woman. And so I was probably in 9th grade when I finally, the first time I didn't wear ponytails. And I remember that was kind of very hard for me because I was getting teased. I was in 7th and 8th grade, and they used to call me Raggedy Ann because I had my hair in ponytails, and I used to use the yarn. You remember the yarn ribbon, the yarn? Oh, girl, I was looking. Yeah. So they used to call me Raggedy Ann. So that was a hard pill to swallow because everybody else at this time was getting perm. This is when perms were getting popular, and I had natural hair. So my mom was like, "We're not doing the perms, and you can't wear your hair down." And I wasn't sufficient. I could not do my hair sufficiently enough to where I could sneak and wear it down. So I wore it in ponytails anyway. And then again, dresses, not form fitting, all of these different things, which is so interesting now because despite, I think that we're living now in a tradition, even with Muslim, all women, period. When you're thinking about modest fashion, it's so many clothing out right now that number one is see-through. So even though you have on clothes, it's so see-through. Like the fabric is so thin. A lot of women are not wearing underwear. And when I
This is
say
a book that talks about
underwear,
the last days.
yeah, it is. Yeah. When you're saying underwear, it's not like underwear like a pair of men's drawers. It's underwear as in a camisole, slips,
Mhm.
tights, all of those things. And when you even if you wear tights, you need to make sure that you still wear a slip because of tights, you can still see the body shape. And it's just like that's a whole lesson in and of itself, but not women not wearing the proper underclothes underneath their clothes, underwear. And then so clothes are too and then everything is so tight. So it's kind of like everybody's walking around looking like they have a blood pressure machine tied to their bodies. And it's so interesting because again, wearing tight clothes like that in a place of worship, it kind of I don't know. It's just kind of like, what's going on for me?
Definitely takes the mind away too. And
Takes
then
the mind
for
away.
men, when you think about even in Islam, when you think about how we are when it's time for service for
Hmm.
Juma, and the men are in the front and the women are in the back,
Yeah.
children are in the middle, and the women are in the back, but they're overseeing and watching everyone, and
Yeah.
the men are in the front so that they can focus on what's right before them and what's being said.
Hmm.
And so if they were behind us, they won't be able to concentrate.
At all, honey.
Looking at everything, walking, this, that, that's,
Right.
and so it's like Allah built us differently,
Mhm.
And so yeah, there was a point I was going to make about that. Y'all excuse me tonight. But of course, it's all about modesty.
Right. I love it. Yes, yes. But the Christian women, again, it even says it in the Bible. It says, um, that women should be dressing modestly with decency, propriety, adorning themselves, and not to elaborate hairstyles or gold or pearls or expensive clothing. Um, in Timothy, it speaks about that. Your beauty shall not come from outward adornment, but such as elaborate hairstyles and wearing of gold, jewelry, or fine clothing. And one thing I also want to note is like when we read those things, immediately people think about like, oh, you have on earrings, oh, you have on makeup, oh, you have on these things. We have to really be able to also understand the historical aspect of how this stuff is translated and what was happening at the time. Because there's also a tradition in Islam where the women and the men used to put gaps in their teeth, right? And so the gaps in the teeth was like a sign of beauty, right? And
Mm,
people would purposely force things into their teeth so that they would have the gap, and they had to really tell them. There was a tradition where it was like, do not do that, right?
mm,
As well as I know some people talk about this sometimes. There's in Islam, we have rules for grooming. And really, to groom your eyebrows is a part of the natural grooming that should be taking place. But people are like, you can't thread your eyebrows. Yes, you can. It's part of the natural grooming, as long as it's not excessive, like with anything. So
mm.
just thinking about like making sure that we understand the historical aspects of what was being translated, why it was being translated, and the actual situation of what happened. Because I think that both in the Bible and in the Quran, as well as other scriptures, when those stories are told, it can be misconstrued because what people like to do is drag and drop, right? Drag it over here and drop it because it sounds like it sounds like it's a part of their situation, but it may not be the total story that's being told.
So, there's another area that kind of talked about from a Christian's point of view. It says, prophets have always counseled us on dressing modestly. It said,
Yeah,
this counsel talks about the truth of the human body and God's sacred creation. And so,
yeah,
respecting our body is a gift from God through your dress and your appearance, and how you can show the Lord that you know how precious your body is. And so
yeah,
when they look at it as being, this is a gift from God, and this is what He gave me, and this is how I should respect it and use it, and honoring Him. And so that's another way of processing really your thought process on why you should do what you do, and why you should wear this shirt that's not see through versus the other one.
right.
Yeah.
And then going into Corinthians, because people love Corinthians. It has some
Mhm.
beautiful scriptures in the Corinthians. But in First Corinthians, it also talks about for the women shall be for if the women be not covered, then let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, then let her be covered. And
Mhm.
so basically, this is again always talking about women being covered. And there are also stories. I believe it was Rebecca. She was in the field, and her maid had told her. She said, "A man approacheth, please cover." And so she gets her adornment and she covers herself, right? And so this is kind of like a practice. Even when you look at the stories where they're trying to emulate the people from the book in the Bible or the time of Jesus as well, alayhi salam, as well as any of the other prophets, you'll always see a woman, even if her hair is not totally covered, she always has a scarf over her head, as
Mm.
if it's some form of adornment and some form of what do you call it? I'm doing you now. It's also some form of
Mhm.
respect in terms of like, you know, the
You know,
woman showing
any of
some
the people,
modesty.
yeah, any of the people that we see images of from the past, whether they were prophets, you know, they're portraying the prophets, or you know, even when you think of Mary and the main picture of Mary and how she has that, even so, the men and the women, they both dressed, you know, and
Yes,
so considering, you know, the Holy Spirit forms, you know,
right,
I'm just thinking about this other thing that they have in here about the first fruits of the eternal glory. And so he's talking about they listed the different things as far as charity and joy and
right,
peace and
right,
patience. And
mhm,
so, you know, kindness and goodness, you know, generosity, all of these kind of things like line up, you know,
right,
gentleness, faithfulness, but modesty being part of your self-control and your chastity. And so I mean, you know, when you're, you know, it doesn't matter how far back dated that you get. And when we think about the history, like you kind of really gave a history lesson when you talked about how the dress over the years started to shift and change between
yeah,
the, you know, the different levels and all of that. But when you look back in just the history of, you know, the people of God, you know, the prophets and all that, you didn't see that.
you didn't
And you
see
would have
that.
thought, you know, and then even when Islam was not prevalent yet, you know,
Yes,
even when that message was not there, you still saw that same thing. And
yeah,
so I know one of the things we wanted to talk about too is getting into the just different examples of different people and different faith backgrounds. We had a
mhm,
we found an article on how different religions, how they did a research on the different religions around the world, how they define modesty.
mhm,
Uh, and so we've got Latter Day Saints, Christians, because you know there's different. You know, I don't know if we had any Jewish in there, and so we're gonna kind of get into that too later on. Okay.
mhm.
Uh,
Or now, let's do it now.
we ready? We ready for that
Yeah,
now?
we're
Okay.
ready for that now.
All right, so it says everyone defines modesty differently. So this particular girl, she is her name's Emily. She's a Latter-day Saint. She says, I believe modesty is an attitude. She said a way of thinking. She said it shows your body respect. She says, I don't think modesty means that you can or cannot wear a particular piece of clothing. She said, and that she doesn't think that it's right or wrong way to be modest. She said, but if you feel comfortable and you're respecting yourself, that is your choice. So
Mhm.
this is like her observation. She said you can easily make an immodest piece modest, immodest piece modest. So kind of like taking something that's funny because I used to do that by
Right.
adding a simple layer. So that's what I talked about earlier, how we just
Yeah.
used to layer different things. And so I know sometimes some people look at them like, oh, you can't wear it. I'll be like, yes, you can. You can just put this with that and put that
Right.
with that. And so, so as long as you, she's saying, as long as you are attracting the appropriate kind of attention, you must be doing something right. She said. So she said,
Right.
modesty is always beautiful. And so, and that's one thing to remember, modesty being something that is beautiful,
Yeah.
but beautiful in on another level, you know, not beautiful in a way where, you know, you might be getting ready to start to define something else.
Right. 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 And also what one thing that was interesting when she said if you're respecting yourself, and I
Mhm.
think that there it used to be a time where that was somewhat relative. I mean, somewhat, universal, but now it's a little bit more relative, right? And even going into what Liz, who is also a Latter-day Saints, talks about, she says, the way I like to dress is to make sure that I cover my knees so that my skirts and dresses are usually 1/4 inch or more below my knee. And so Liz may see that, but Emily may see it a little bit different. Like, oh, as she stated, if you're comfortable. So again, the comfortability of how people are comfortable with what they wear, again, has a lot to do with their relationship with themselves and their Lord. And then she also says that this way I feel like I can move around and never worry if I bend over and my G's showing in the back or my legs, etc. I also like shorts that fit 1 to 2 inches below my knees so that I can sit and they never pass my knees. And she goes on to, she doesn't like to wear tight fitting clothes, revealing clothes. She doesn't like to wear leggings or tight jeans. And she likes for her sleeves to be covering well past her shoulders, so she doesn't like cap sleeves, right? She likes her collars to be collar up to her collarbone, and I mean she's very, very. Her style of dress is very intricate in terms of like what her preference is, and of course it is in general how a lot of modest clothes are as well. But it's just interesting again how all of these different women kind of view modesty in a different way.
Yeah, and it's interesting that she said that people actually ask her where she buys her clothes. She said because they never can find anything like that. She said it's sad. She said I wish there were more options for people who want to dress more covered up. So it's kind of funny because when I think about why I got into fashion, sometimes it is hard for people to find more, or either maybe learning how to style it, figuring out how to put it together.
Yeah.
And then for some, because it's the normal thing and all of the people that they're around are doing this, like, I just have to do this too, and the fear of not wanting to be different or be looked at, like, oh, you wearing that, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that also in this article, Tendra, who's a Catholic, she was just saying that the way that she sees it is that Catholic modesty is more nuanced than any rules about fingers from the throat and whatnot. So as a Catholic, she wants to be attractive to people. And that means having a smile, being kind, and dressing in a way that is attractive rather than provocative or attention grabbing. So her personal goal is to dress modestly for her age, her activity, her personal style, and the state of life, and not in a way that's going to direct attention to her body rather than her personal self. And that's what she's trying to teach her children also. Modesty isn't about rules, she says. It's about how she wants people to react to her and remember her. And then that's so funny because it reminds me of the Chris Rock show, or a comedy, stand-up comedy, when he was talking about, and I know this may throw a couple of people off, but the guy was, touching the woman's body, and she was like, "Why are you touching me?" And he was like, "Don't you want to be touched?" And this is kind of like, this is a little bit condensed, right? But he was saying, well, if you're dressing a specific way, which is not mannerable, how do you think that people are going to treat you? Right? And it's kind of like, yeah, if you dress in a way that is very, very provocative, why wouldn't someone want to be attracted to that provocative? So we use this term loosely called sexy, but sexy really means having or being related to sex. And so when we say we want to dress sexy, right? It's
modest with a little sex appeal.
Right. Yeah. Which is an oxymoron. Modesty and sexy do not go together. And sexy can be in a different way behind closed doors. But we're not trying to be sexy in public and then say we're also modest. This is something to think about.
I was trying to figure out which next story I wanted to pull out. So I'm just going to talk about Becca. She's a Christian. So she kind of talks about what the Bible said in the verse that you read earlier in Timothy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what she said was that she said that the Bible doesn't give the exact measurements of what type of clothing to wear, you know, what kind of shirt to wear. She said, but it gives guidelines on how to not draw sexual attention to yourselves.
Right.
And so, and then she is, which is like pretty much what we've been talking about. So she said,
Right.
not causing another person to stumble by, by based on what it is that you're wearing when you walk by. So she says, it's not particularly about covering up your bodies because we are wanting to hide ourselves. It's more about being humble and serving others and revealing your own dignity.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's
Mhm.
kind of like as Muslim women, that's what we do. Like
Exactly.
we're dressing particularly to um, hide our body, not to, again, not to hide our bodies, but to respect our bodies
Mhm.
and
And the
to,
others around you.
yes, and to have a level of dignity. Again, when you're walking out and you seeing people who are revealing themselves, it really says less about why they're doing it and more about, I mean, less about them and more about why they're doing that specific thing. And it's not really about sometimes, like, you know, now it's kind of like, oh, I respect myself. And it's almost like women say they respect themselves, and it's like anything goes when you say you respect yourself. Like,
Mhm.
as long as I'm happy with what I am, who I am, and what I'm doing, it's okay for me to dress how I want to. You can't challenge me. You can't tell me what to do. But at the end of the day, it's not that man is doing it. It's that God has already set these guidelines, and that we need to fall in line with those particular things. And it's just so far fetched. But again, that also goes back to, how religion is regularly practiced. And it used to be that America was actually built on the foundation of religious order. And
Mhm.
then once Americans weren't getting rich off religion anymore, then of course it turned into big agricultural type situation, and so the whole world changed. So even now we're looking at the industrial world where, yeah, no one's really thinking about these religious orders in order to, even politically, it used to be where religion was a part of the political landscape, and then of course separation of church
Breaking it
and
out.
state, right? And
Mhm.
so now it's kind of like anything goes. So the fact that modesty is a multi-billion-dollar industry still is phenomenal. I love it.
Well, we're going to go back to the Quran, where Allah speaks in the Quran and said, whenever faith is mentioned, actions are mentioned too, but right behind it. And so those who
Yeah.
believe and work righteously. Says so about modesty, what is it exactly? Modesty is a part of one's faith. So from Bukhari
Yeah.
Muslim, this is a hadith, speaks about modesty being the key. It's a sign of one's faith. It portrays a positive image. Talks about covering being a mercy from Allah. It gives
Mm.
us protection and it stimulates the intellect and it gives purity in the heart. And so we've kind of pretty much touched on all of these things, and it helps to cut off ill thoughts. So we're like the same things, even for like we just got through reading some comments on the different faith backgrounds of other women who are not Muslim,
Yeah.
and so we're all in the same. We're all trying to achieve the same thing, and so we do encourage modesty. Like I said, it's definitely an important sign of your faith, and your which includes your character, your dress, everything.
Yes.
So, with all the negative things in society, we believe that we can focus on taking a stand together, for positive
Yes.
change and just trying to make things better these days. So,
Right.
so go ahead.
And something else that it says, when modesty is absent,
Hmm.
so is faith, right?
Hmm.
So it was stated that in one hadith that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that when faith and modesty are like a pair, and
Hmm.
when one goes down, the other goes down. So we just have to kind of think about those things when we start again finding ourselves like getting all of these life coaches that do not line up with our way of thinking, right? Because they're going to coach you into something that's not parallel with your principles. And so when you see Muslim women or religious women or women of any faith that have been living a specific lifestyle, you see them changing and becoming more immodest, or they're feeling like, oh, I'm my true self now. No,
Mhm.
your true self is in alignment with God. Your
Mhm.
true self is always in alignment with your creator. You are his creation. And you doing your own thing has absolutely nothing to do with respect, has absolutely nothing to do with modesty, and has absolutely nothing to do with faith. Everything is in alignment with your Lord. And so that's something we just want to encourage people to do. Again,
Mhm.
it's your relationship with your Lord, but constantly be leaning toward that. And I think that we're kind of like in a society right now where that's not something that people even think about.
Okay, so I think we just about covered it on modesty today.
I think
But
so.
so I do want to kind of mention one thing and then
Mhm.
kind of wrap it up. So we kind of talk about what it looks like with modesty, and I know you kind of talked about when modesty is absent with some of those things. And it makes me think about just our youth and how we kind of put these different programs together to try to help them and work through whatever, whether it's them being able to take on their role in society, and not have to struggle so much with premarital sex and bad character and this language that sometimes when you hear them talk, like it's like, so when we talk about it starting in the heart and the mind and then outwardly,
Yeah.
it's an inside and out thing. I think that we definitely need to maybe do more things in the community to service our youth, so that we can and get them while they're young, like even
Yeah.
before, let's do elementary school, middle school. You got to get them before they get to middle school, actually.
That part.
Oh, so and then I know we're talking about the children, but for those that already have missed the spot, when we think about, like for example, we're looking at children in a private school, and then maybe a little bit different than public school with certain things, but at the same time they're still challenged with certain
Right.
things at the same
Right.
time. So sometimes the question is, what's going on at home?
Yeah.
So, having a stable family or unstable family, all of that really kind of matters. And so teaching starts at home. We all know that. And so
Mhm.
we can work with our children, but we need to uh, also make sure the parenting, have some things set in place to help them with that, so that modesty is just as important. Because, a lot of times I may see, we may see somebody who's dressed in modest, and because that's their way, you see the little 3-year-old, she got on her little everything the mama got on, that even though she ain't developed yet, but she's instilling that in her on this is how you can dress. And
Yeah.
it starts there. And so we just want to continue the path of positive change in our community, and let
Mhm.
us grow and learn from one another, and
Yeah.
let us be good examples for our youth, and look at ourselves and ask ourselves, how can we contribute to make us better as a people, as a whole, and let us be steadfast, and just offering this dua, which is an ayat from Quran. Oh, our Lord, let our entry be by the gate of truth and honor, and likewise our exit
I mean,
by the gate of truth and honor. And grant us from thy presence and authority to aid us. Sadaqallahu al-Adin. And so, oh, that just took me. It's been a rough week,
yeah. Yeah.
We're just thinking about, oh,
Yep.
here in Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a rough week, but alhamdulillah, at the end of the day, Allah is God. And
Yes.
as we're moving forward, we have a couple of shout out commercials we want to do this week. So
Mhm.
again, if you're looking for modest fashion, go on to Facebook, Instagram, and check out Queen's Creations. So
Mhm.
again, Queen's Creations, beautiful, beautiful fashions on there. And as well as you can go to the website, the official queenscreation.com. And also check out the Sealed
Well,
Nectar Fashion Show. Sealed Nectar Fashion Show coming up 2023 will be the
mhm.
36th annual fashion show. It is the fashion show for the Atlanta Masjid of Al Islam. And when I tell you, has been going on um,
30 plus.
uninterrupted.
Mm,
Uninterrupted. So 30 plus years. And so so happy to be a part of that movement because again, this is something about generational teaching not only women that they can be beautiful, they can be models, but also young girls. We've had
mm,
young designers in the show as
mm.
young as 14 and models in the show as young as 2 years old. So again, always encouraging modesty
Yeah,
for
watch them
all
grow.
ages,
Mhm.
always encouraging any woman if she wants to be a model that she can be a model. So the Sealed Nectar Fashion Show. What were you going to say about Queen's Creation?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, official Queens Creation is my Instagram page, and the website is queenscreationsfashions.com or
Okay, Queen's Creation.
queens-creations.com. But Queens Creations Fashions would be the easiest way to get there.
Okay.
Queenscreationsfashions.com. Yes, please do take a look at the site. Contact us to see what we can do for you. We love making you beautiful.
Yes, and as you know, some of the featured items that Queen's Creation has, of course, are the beautiful wedding gowns. And
Mhm.
so, if you're interested in getting your gown made, hey, start early so you can pay on time. Okay, so thinking about doing all of that for your wedding, and if not, if you have a specialty dress that you'd love to have for that specific event, reach out again, Queen's Creations, and then of course, anything you can think of, athletic wear, everyday wear, business wear, just super classy, classic pants, classic tops, all of those good things. And don't forget the ultimate butterfly wrap. The butterfly wrap, where you can take it into
Mhm.
7, 10, 20, 30 different ways.
Infinity.
That wrap.
Well,
Okay.
when you mentioned wedding dresses, I have to say, I know a lot of people have seen me on TV thinking about 90 Day Fiance. And so with the wedding dresses, um, with my sister-in-law, Shida,
Yeah.
she got married to Bilal, I did her wedding dress and she
Yeah.
was she was beautiful.
I'll give you
And even the dress before that, the
right.
prank dress that everybody's talking about.
Yes. That
It was
was beautiful as well. Yes.
Yes, it's a real dress, not good hanger appeal, but a real dress, and the bride was beautiful as well. And
Yeah.
so definitely we can take care of you and your needs and make you beautiful and let your day be just as memorable as the previous brides.
Yes.
Look
So
forward to
don't lose hope in modest fashion.
Yes.
Tons out there, so many people to support, especially in the Muslim community. Buy your clothing from Muslim designers.
Mhm. So many of us, so
Come
many of
on,
us.
let's make sure that we are taking up so many Muslim designers. So make sure we're taking it up a notch by again supporting a Muslim designer. But again, thank you so much, Crown Nation. We want to again ask you to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and to like us on Facebook. And until next week, we hope to see you back again. And wear those, well, look, get that modest fashion. Rock it this week. All right,
Good
everybody.
night. Thank you
We'll
so
see
much.
you.
We'll see you next week.
Assalamu alaikum, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.